पहलवान का मतलब समाज का पहला इंसान है, एक सादगी का प्रतीक है।
It's a sport that's very rooted in its ruralness, and people take a lot of pride in the fact that our village is organizing a dangal.
An akhada is essentially just a training area. It's almost like a boarding school for warriors.
दिल्ली एनसीआर में लगातार क्राइम का ग्राफ बढ़ता
पिछले कई दिनों से यहाँ आधी रात के बाद कभी भी गोली कानून का अपराधियों को डर है, न ही पुलिस का खौफ है।
बिल्कुल चारों तरफ दिल्ली के गैंग है और दिल्ली बीच में है।
Chhatrasal Stadium itself and where Sushil's village is. Satpal comes from Najafgarh. This is the gangland of Delhi.
अपने बच्चे के लिए कभी डर लगता है कि जब वो हो जाए 17-18 का इस गलत संगत में न फंस जाए गलती से?
ये डर तो शुरू से ही था, उसी से बचने के लिए पहलवानी का रास्ता चुना है।
जो बच्चा शरारती होता था, गांव में उद्दंडता करता था, तो उसको अखाड़े में इसलिए छोड़ा जाता था कि वो एक डिसिप्लिन में आ जाएगा।
When you are in an akhada, you are cut off from the civilized world.
For every akhada to run, it needs money, and the political patronage is there. They provide the funds for running of the akhadas.
देखो पहलवान है जो अखाड़े में लड़ता है, उसे बहुत आलोचनाओं से लड़ना पड़ता है।
Eventually, how far can you separate society? You know what's happening in society from what is happening in a safe space like an akhada as well.
An ugly, scary, truly disturbing Pandora's box on the gangster nexus between wrestlers and criminal organizations in Delhi NCR.
पहली गैंगवारी अखाड़ों से शुरू हुई थी। अखाड़े से किशन पहलवान, अनूप पहलवान, दोनों पहलवान के नाम से जाने जाते हैं और करीब करीब दोनों गैंग की वजह से करीब 200-250 लोग पूरी दिल्ली में मर्डर हुए हैं।
पहले समय ऐसा आया था, अखाड़ों को एक गुंडा समझने शुरू कर दिया था, और यहाँ इलेक्शन के टाइम पे यहाँ एसपी फोर्स भेजता था, सब पहलवानों के फोटो होते थे।
लोग सड़क पे चलते पहलवानों को देख के पीट दिया करते थे। इधर पहलवानों गुंडागर्दी करते हो।
This is the nature of the sport. It's the nature of how deeply embedded it is in northern India.
Sushil was that guy who got in and like, I'll smash these guys. I'll get it.
सुशील के मेडल आने के बाद कुश्ती बदल गई।
He was the first superstar of Indian wrestling.
That was definitely the turning point for Indian wrestling.
दिल्ली के छत्रसाल स्टेडियम में दो गुटों के बीच झगड़े में 4 पहलवानों को गंभीर चोट लगी, जिसमें एक पहलवान सागर की मौत हो चुकी है।
From coaches to many young wrestlers, all of them are shocked.
कुश्ती जगत को एक ऐसा झटका लगा है कि कुछ कह नहीं सकते।
कुश्ती खेल के लिए तो एक बहुत ही बुरा हुआ।
सब कुछ छिन गया, हुआ इज्जत नहीं रही।
Criminal world and the wrestling world, they have coexisted always in a state of balance. So for the wrestlers themselves, I think it's not a surprise.
जो रेसलर होता है वो क्रिमिनल बनने के लिए ही नहीं होता, पर एक ऐसा रिश्ता होता है जो कहते हैं ना, थिन लाइन होती है।
You put all your eggs in one basket. If the first thing which you have dedicated your life for, if that doesn't happen, then what do you do?
So first of all, hi, this is Parvin Dabas from MMAindia.com, and welcome Niyantha. Did I pronounce it correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Niyantha, yeah.
So congrats on your documentary.
Thank you.
And it was fabulous. I have to say I loved it, being a combat sports fan and a crime fan as well, though usually these are not two things you would want to combine. You know, wrestling and crime is not something we would want to combine, but it's not like you and me did it. You know, it's been going on due to various factors, which we'll talk about now. And you know, I want to give you a very interesting, before we really start. You know, I come from that area as well. You know, I come from outer Delhi. I wasn't totally brought up there. I was born there, but I was from about the age of 3 to 13. I was abroad, but then after that also. So I know quite a lot of people. So when I saw the documentary, I know the milieu very well, and I've known people like that. Some of my own cousins, friends had gotten involved, you know, in wrong things, so to speak. I've met a couple of people also who are spoken about in the documentary. I can't say who, I don't want to take any names, but so very interesting, when I saw it, because I know that world very well, and it's a great documentary because it raises a lot of questions also, right, about the system itself, right, and why the system would allow these things to happen if it is the system, so to speak. So really interesting, fabulous insights that you've given as a director, and very interesting how you would have gotten into this, because like you said, right now you're from Chennai, you're based out of Mumbai, but it is a very the way we've seen it right now, it's a very North NCR specific tone, and the location of what's happening is very specific to that area. So first of all, tell me, did you always want to make a wrestling specific documentary, or is it the Sushil Kumar incident which, for lack of a better term, gave it even the bigger spotlight and even more prominence, where you said, listen, now that there's a big name involved in this as well, can we pull the trigger literally and make a documentary on this?
Like you said, I am from Chennai, and so for me the world of wrestling in Delhi NCR was not a world that I was familiar with going into this project. Vice Media, which is the production house for this documentary, and Discovery, who's the broadcaster, they had spoken about this topic, and they had gotten in touch with me to ask if I, as a director, would be interested in exploring the story. And so that was my introduction to this world. And as a documentary filmmaker, it's often the case that my first interaction with a topic or a story, I may be as new to it as any other person. But what I find interesting as a filmmaker is to do the research, to talk to a lot of people who live that experience and understand from their perspective what they feel is the ground reality, and also to spend the time on the ground to visually understand what is the best way to visually communicate the story, to understand the spaces that wrestlers inhabit in North India, in Delhi NCR, to understand both the dreams and the fears that they may possess, and to tell it through their voices. If you notice, we have not employed a narrator in this documentary. We are telling the story through the voices of people from the community. So that was kind of my process to enter the story, was to acknowledge the fact that I am not from this world, but to talk to people and understand better, and also have people on my team who are, say, from Haryana, who have their own lived experiences, and can also help build trust between me as a filmmaker and the community as well.
So, that comes to my second question is, you're making a crime documentary, around this subject and this area. And like you guys have rightly mentioned, a lot of the wrestlers are very imposing figures, Did you ever feel, you were risking your crew, or or did you ever feel threatened, or was there any risk that you felt while going about this? Because somebody could have taken offense to the subject matter very easily. One would think that depending, but luckily, like you said, you did have people acting as a go-between as well from there. Yeah. So I'm guessing that kind of softened before you went in. So how was that process, and did you ever feel yourself or the crew threatened or in a bad situation?
So we kind of took it step by step. So the first thing we did was we spoke to people on the phone, and then we asked, can we come meet you in person, to saying, this is a topic that we're exploring and we want to know more about it. So we took it step by step. We first went only as 2 or 3 people. We went and met various coaches, various people, various wrestlers, journalists, retired cops, and so on. And we spoke to them first from purely a research perspective to understand the story. And because we went in to listen, and not to say this is the story, but to listen and understand the story. I think it enabled them to be like, okay, this is a two-way street. And the ultimate goal is that the world of wrestling should improve. That the reason we are talking about issues is that if we speak about it, then it means that there is a chance that we can bring in changes. We can help improve the lives of wrestlers at the grassroots level. So I think the intention people bought into, they felt that there is value in talking about the dark side of things as well, so that we can move towards the light. In that way, we kind of took it step by step, built trust slowly. And then by the time we went to film, they were already very familiar with us. And so the fear of the camera was not there. The fear of, oh, who are these outsiders coming in, was not there. Since it was a step-by-step process, it felt quite organic that way. And so as a crew as well, we felt very welcomed and felt very comfortable that way.
Now, our Indian wrestlers have seen a lot of success during the Tokyo Olympics, and of course before that. Now, it's like a cult-like status a lot of them have achieved, and of course it all started with Mr. Sushil Kumar itself, like you mentioned in the documentary. Now, it's kind of ironic that the person, Sushil Kumar, who brought this revolution into Indian wrestling, though we've had for a long time in the NCR region, but it's Sushil Kumar's medal which kind of changed everything for everyone. And like you rightly said, before that, a lot of them were looked upon as Pelwan hai to kuch gadbad hoga types. But now it's a little ironic that the kind of spotlight on what was going on before, is kind of back on the Indian arm wrestling community because of Sushil Kumar as well, something that he's gotten involved in. So do you feel that talking about this now also where, like I said, there's a momentum towards arm wrestling, very positive, wrestling, very positive, about the kids wanting to join in again, and it being able to be a profession, a lot of status attached with as anytime Olympic medals bring us, they bring that a lot of the youth want to join in. Do you think something like this, a documentary where the subject matter is like this, takes some of that sheen away again, and it though one is not presenting anything, it is what it is, but do you think it takes a little of that sheen away from people who may be wanting to come into wrestling again, and take a sheen away from the Tokyo, what the wrestlers have done for India from the Tokyo Olympics?
So interestingly, one of the questions I had asked a sports journalist who was there as one of the characters in the film was something similar, that had what happened in 2021, how would that affect the aspirations and the ambitions of young wrestlers or people who want to become wrestlers? And he believed that the love for the sport is so strong in Delhi NCR amongst the people, that people will continue to go to akhadas, like kids will continue to go to akhadas over the immense efforts that have been done over the past 20-30 years to move our wrestling community from the mud to the mat, so that we can find success at the international level. All those efforts have led to results like we saw with Ravi Dahiya and Bajrang Punia in Tokyo. So I believe that our success at the wrestling at the top level will continue to grow. We have an incredible number of talented wrestlers and coaches and facilities as well these days to continue that. But I think it's important as well that as we celebrate our successes, we should also look to see how can we holistically keep improving the lives of our members of the wrestling community, the opportunities and the resources for our younger wrestlers, the wrestlers on the grassroots level who may not see the spotlight, right? As with any sport, only a small number can make it at the top. So one of the intentions of this documentary was to show that let's also look at the people at the grassroots level, people who may not make it to the top. Let's also make sure that they have good opportunities ahead of them, while also celebrating what we are able to achieve internationally.
Now, while researching Dangals of Crime, did you come across any incidents which kind of surprised you, like fact or incident which kind of surprised you?
I mean, one thing that surprised me, which you'll see in episode 2, is how entrenched crime can be. As one of the journalists says in the documentary, you may not know that it's even in front of you. And so the way in which organized crime has increased was surprising for me. And from a crime perspective, but from a sport perspective, there were many surprises for me in the sense that, of course, we've won medals since 2008 at the Olympics, but learning about the stories of our great wrestlers before that, in the 80s, 90s, and the 70s, we had several great wrestlers who did well at the Indian level, at the domestic level, but unfortunately couldn't convert at the international level because the training methods were different. So getting to read about and learn about some past heroes of Indian wrestling was also very eye-opening for me to understand how long this tradition has existed in India, how venerated and celebrated it is. And it's great to know that today at a global level as well, people are aware of our wrestling riches. So from a sports perspective, that was eye-opening for me.
And what other challenges, did you face making this documentary? One, of course, was we talked about was approaching the people itself, and like you said, you did it over phases. Were there any other challenges you faced because of the milieu, because of the places, or any other reasons? Or did you ever even feel uncomfortable, even though you made these phone calls, you reached out to people? Was there any time you felt uncomfortable also in any situation while being present on location?
I mean, I wouldn't say that. I mean, as a documentary filmmaker, there are some common issues that you face on any project, which is that you have to roll with the punches in terms of, like, for example, it started to pour down in Delhi unexpectedly the week that we were filming, and we couldn't stop filming. We had to continue. And so to kind of find ways to use that to the benefit of the film, for example, the opening scenes of the film were shot on the day where it rained the most, but it brought a character to those shots that communicated that there is some darkness underneath that we need to open our eyes to. So as a filmmaker, as a documentary filmmaker, those kinds of issues keep coming up, whether it is maybe someone saying that, I don't actually want to talk about this on camera, or facing issues where, for example, we tried filming a Dangal, but it took 2-3 attempts for us to find one that was happening because Dangals have reduced now with various factors. Yeah. So various things like that. Logistically, you face a lot of issues that you need to work through and be very hands-on and figure out. So I wouldn't say anything unique to this project, but more like issues that as a documentary filmmaker, you are almost ready yourself to be like, be ready for it and try and solve it the best you can on the ground.
Yeah, it's really ironic because the first film I directed, feature Sahidan De Galat Bande, was based on a wrestler who never quite made it, and he got into crime. He got into working underneath somebody for money, for exactly what it's shown in here, ghar khali karwana, plot khali karwana, and all that kind of stuff. So like I said, I did a lot of research at that time. Otherwise, so I understand this milieu, and what really not only, I wouldn't say surprised, but what I really loved, was the preciseness, of the documentary, of covering all the angles and getting everything, all angles of this debate, covered. So I really, really enjoyed that. Now, one thing I want to talk about is, why is it you think, having met many of these guys, why is it you think that this particular, the crime happens in the wrestling sphere? We can't just say it's in NCR, because in NCR you have a lot of other athletes, right? You have a lot of boxers coming out of that area as well, right? But you don't hear of a lot of boxers going into crime. Right. Why is it only more specific to wrestlers? Is it because maybe their diet needs and money needs are much, much more, or is it mainly that? Do you have any answers for that? That why specifically wrestling?
I mean, one factor you mentioned is one of the factors I feel, which is that wrestling is a sport that requires, it takes a lot of money to support a wrestler, 1,500 rupees a day maybe for diet, which if you to look at it over the course of a month, it's quite a lot of money for someone from a low income family. So one factor is that it is a relatively expensive sport in that sense. The second is that a lot of wrestlers go to akhadas, which are almost like boarding schools. And so they go into an environment where all they see is wrestling for 15, 20 years. They don't have the opportunity maybe to go to school, for example, because all the energy goes into wrestling. And I feel like that makes them uniquely susceptible in the sense that when they come out of the akhada system, if they are not, they do not have an educational degree, for example, or a plan B, because all their energy has gone into one thing and it hasn't manifested for them for some reason. That is the second thing. And the third thing is that they have spent 15, 20 years learning how to fight. They have spent 15, 30 years building their body. And they now become, for bad elements, that becomes a valuable proposition, where they're able to make use of their, the sense of intimidation that could come from that to their, bad means. And so they're able to, I feel, maybe make use of the innocence of some wrestlers who may step into the wrong path without realizing it, and then it becomes a slippery slope. So one thing that a lot of people we spoke to suggested was that if we can bring education into the world of wrestling, if you can educate the wrestlers,
if
you can bring education into the world of wrestling.
Education.
Yeah, if akhadas could have a means of education, then even those wrestlers who don't make it to the top have a plan B, because they now have other skills, or they have other means to find employment and occupation, and also the awareness of what is right and what is wrong, what is the right path and what is the wrong path. So that was a key thing that many people said, that if that could come in, that could help a lot.
Which is like how they do it in the US, right? That, if you've got a system, sports background and scholarship, the whole collegiate system, exactly, and here I think that is, of course, necessary as well. Before we get that into that a little more, is it also like, kind of like when, the wrong elements are enticing young cricketers into the sporting world, into the betting world? They first give them a little taste, might ask them, I think Shane Warne is who made it famous by saying, they just asked me about the pitch conditions first, and they gave me a little money for that. And that's how, sometimes they rope in, people. Do you think here also, because they have such needs, the easy money is what really kind of gets them in, and first they get an easy job, and then afterwards it becomes much more, because we know like you've rightly covered, is the formation of all these gangs and how they got assimilated into these gangs. But does it start off with a small little a job of giving these guys a taste of that money that they really need?
Yeah, I mean, in the second episode of our documentary, one of the wrestlers talks about how he went into one of these jobs because it would cover 1 week of his expenses. So that is definitely a thing that they prey on. I feel that there are certain needs that these wrestlers have. And as another coach in the documentary says, it's not that the wrestlers are asked to do something criminal the first time. They are accessories to crime almost. And so the initial entry point may seem innocuous, may seem like you may not even realize you're doing something wrong or you're going into a wrong path. But because they find themselves in that circumstance, maybe it's hard for them to pull themselves out of it once they step in.
Yeah, it's almost like they could just be told, listen, you just have to come and stand around. You know, we're going to go for a meeting. Tumne jaake khada hona hai bas 3-4 ko.
Exactly.
You know, I think that's how you know it basically starts.
Yeah.
And the rest of it is just pulling them into it in a much more serious manner. Yeah. Now, tell me the solution to this. Right? Of course, we've spoken about the collegiate system, but that's not going to happen overnight. Right? That's a real big overhaul of the system. How do we prevent these young guys? Because if you think about it, all they want to do was wrestle. You've spoken about the passion that so many of them had for wrestling, and to make it big in the Olympics, which is, the Mount Everest of sport. It's not easy. These kids, they give their, life's blood to it, and at the end of it, not everybody can win, not everybody wins. The difference between first, second, or even whether you qualify or not is such a big thing that not all of them, are able to do it. So apart from the big overhauls in the system, what are some of the small changes that we can do? Do you think the federation also has a hand in this, or a stronger responsibility to be overlooking what each and every athlete is doing and follow up in their career and have some kind of a plan of where they're going? And do you think that overlooking should also include the federation in a larger role? Because we all know how federations work in our country, or for that matter, even abroad. So do you think them, more responsible people, or them playing a stronger role can help? Because a solution is definitely needed. Right. Because like I said, these sports guys are just there to win, right? Yeah. Their intention of getting into wrestling is not, I'm going to get into wrestling because I can make money in crime after this.
Yeah.
That's not their intention, right? It's something where they've been diverted. So what is the short-term solution, to like you've spoken about education, collegiate system, but there has to be other ways of educating and, giving these kids some kind of sustenance, so they don't have to look at crime as a form of, making money.
I mean, one thing that a lot of parents and coaches were telling me was that, one is education with a capital E, which is like, a proper, like a collegiate system, which is a long-term overhaul almost. But there is also education with a small e, which is basically telling young wrestlers what to be aware of, what to question. Like I said, a lot of the times their innocence is made use of. Having not really experienced the outside world, their innocence is made use of to pull them into nefarious activities. And so even communicating certain things to be aware of, some form of training in that sense of like, these are the attributes, or these are the conversations that you need to be wary of. These are the red flags that you need to keep in mind when it comes to who do you go out with, what gifts do you take. Like, it's a very similar, I would say, to like we recently saw with Brendan Taylor from the Zimbabwe cricket team, who has just come out saying, he was ensnared in match fixing because he wasn't sure how to deal with that situation. So I think there is that aspect to it of like, before you get into it, if you know more, then the chances of you getting, like, it's very hard to get out once you get in, is what, we've come to see through all these recounting of all these anecdotes and experiences. So what can we do to educate them at almost one-on-one level? What can coaches do? What can parents do? What can family members do to say that you are going in with the best intentions, but you must also be wary of these things. You must be wary of these conversations. You must be wary of potential people you could meet on your path to glory. So keep your eyes and ears open to that. And these are some steps you could take. This is a person you could raise it with. This is that sort of thing. Maybe we could give very practical advice at a one-on-one level while the larger systemic measures are happening. Maybe that could help.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Niyantha. It was really, really a pleasure speaking to you. And I want to tell all the viewers of MMAindia.com and the MM India show, this is a documentary that you have to watch. Dangals of Crime, coming soon on Discovery Plus. And you guys really have to watch it, especially all the combat sports fans. Please watch it. Thank you so much. And we look forward to your next documentary, pretty soon. So thank you for your time, and take care. All the best.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.